and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to do something a bit different. I'm gonna actually answer the question I've been most asked in my private life. How did I learn so many languages? So I'm gonna share 8 tips in the 8 different languages that I speak. Don't worry, there will be subtitles. Languages meant so much in my life. It got me better friendships, better opportunities at work, and overall a more interesting life. But there's so much more to languages. And I will also debunk some language myths, some myths that go wrong everywhere on how to learn or not learn languages. I will debunk them, such as, for example, is there a maximum amount of languages you can learn? I hope these tips will help you learn languages fast. Languages have never been something I did full time. It was always something that I did on the side of my other passions, on the side of my career. I never took a year to learn a language. So I think this can be very useful if you already have a busy life and don't have the time to take 1 year off to go somewhere and learn the language. Before we dive in, I would like to ask you, please like and subscribe. This encourages creators a lot and makes us very happy. So if you do that, thanks. And now let's dive in. Tip number 1 and language number 1, English. So one of the best methods to learn a language is to do it over a long time. And for that, you need to create systems in your life to keep yourself accountable. For instance, plan a trip in a faraway date, for example, in a year, to go to, for example, a place where the language is spoken, and often a less touristic place. This will force you to learn the language, otherwise your holiday will be less good. But if you don't have that money, you can also do it locally. Try to set systems in place where you will be confronted to the language and be reminded of everything you can gain if you learn it. For example, there are communities in your own country of nationals of where maybe the language you want to learn. And if you can come in contact with them or go to their cultural events, you can also buy books in the language you want to learn. And typically a book of something you want to know what is written in there, that will make you want to learn the language and keep you reminded how important it is to learn language, all the new doors that will open for you. Language number 2, French. And tip number 2, don't be afraid to make mistakes. Donc ne passez pas trop de temps sur les détails, surtout si vous êtes au début de l'apprentissage de cette langue. C'est beaucoup plus important d'acquérir de la pratique que de focaliser sur les petites règles de grammaire. En France, on a une tendance de se focaliser beaucoup sur les erreurs, surtout les erreurs de langue. Et ça nous vient de notre enseignement en fait, quand on apprenait le français ou l'anglais à l'école, surtout l'anglais. On se critiquait les uns les autres, tout le monde avait peur de parler parce que si on faisait une erreur, c'était mal. Et au début, quand on apprend à faire quelque chose, il ne faut pas avoir peur de faire des erreurs parce que de toute façon, on le fera mal. C'est la pratique qui va nous rendre meilleurs. C'est comme sur YouTube, les premières vidéos seront nulles. Et peut-être que si on en fait beaucoup, elles seront meilleures. Donc si vous voulez progresser rapidement, ne focalisez pas sur vos erreurs. Point 3 in Spanish, how to stay motivated. Aprender un idioma requiere mucho tiempo. Es importante mantener la motivación. La motivaciones para aprender un idioma son distintas de persona a persona, pero también hay varias y pueden ser al mismo tiempo. Por ejemplo, poder hablar a más personas, poder viajar más fácilmente a unos países, aprender el idioma porque le encuentras lindo. Pero también te puede ayudar en tu trabajo, aunque no lo sabes. Por ejemplo, para mí, cuando aprendí el español, no sabía que unos años después me iba a permitir a tener un muy buen trabajo, muy buen pagado, que me permitirá pagar por la maestría 2 años después. Los idiomas abren muchas puertas en su vida. A mi vida ha abierto muchas puertas y por eso solo puedo recomendar hablar idiomas. Pero es importante quedarse motivado. Escribes las motivaciones en un papel, lo pones en algún lugar. Y si un día no quieres poner tiempo, tú tienes ganas de aprender el idioma más, puedes leer la lista para saber todo lo que puedes ganar en aprender este idioma y reencontrar un poco de motivación. Tip number 4 in Norwegian, make language learning fun. Som så mye ting i liv, hvis du ikke liker å gjøre noe, da skal du ikke gjøre det på lang sikt uten at du blir tvunget til det. Og sånn gjelder det også for språk. Det er viktig når du lærer språk, å gjøre det på en måte som er morsomt for deg, interessant for deg, og det kan være veldig forskjellig. Jeg anbefaler for eksempel å kjøre på en kokebok i denne språk og prøve å lage oppskrifter. Sånn du vil lage oppskrifter og liker å lage mat, da vil du prøve å forstå, og det er også en liten lek for deg. Du kan også gå på for eksempel TV-kanal i den språk når jeg lærte norsk, gikk jeg på NRK, og så på ting som jeg allerede så, temaer som jeg allerede så på, i mitt hjemmeland, for eksempel reiselivvideoer, men også shows om nyheter, geopolitikk, podcaster i denne språk, og det hjelper meg veldig mye på en vei. For eksempel hvis jeg ville vite hva som hadde skjedd, og det var en ord som jeg ikke skjønte, måtte jeg gå og søke det opp. Og det gjorde at jeg fortsatte å lære språk ganske raskt. Det var en annen ting som gjorde at jeg lærte norsk spesielt raskt, at jeg lærte en travel guide ut av hodet mitt. Dette kan kanskje ikke være morsomt for alle, men jeg har ikke noen fotografisk minne, og jeg lurte på hvis jeg kunne huske en hel bok ut av min hode. Det var sånn lille travel guide, det var ikke så mye, men det var de mest brukte ord, sikkert når du reiser. Det viktigste er å lære de ord som man bruker mest, og det hjalp meg veldig mye på vei. Når noen stilte en spørsmål, kunne jeg forstå det ganske lett, fordi jeg allerede snakket nederlandsk på den tid, men det svaret var veldig vanskelig. Men noen ganger kunne jeg finne en lignende setning i min repertoire, på norsk, i min lille repertoire i hodet mitt som jeg hadde skaffet, og så kunne jeg snakke det, og det hørtes litt robotisk ut i begynnelse, men det hjalp meg mye på vei. Også det var morsomt å finne nye måter, nye triks til å lære det ut av hodet sitt, se hva som fungerte, hva som ikke fungerte. Jeg synes det er interessant å lære hvordan en lærer. Det er ikke kanskje interessant for alle, men du kan finne din egen måte som det blir interessant på å lære språk. En annen ting som du kan gjøre er å lære 2 språk samtidig. Jeg gjorde det med norsk og italiensk. Jeg kjøpte sånn lille travel guide, reiseguide på norsk tror jeg. Og det var italiensk til norsk. Og så har du norsk-italiensk oversetning, og lære de samtidig. Jeg anbefaler ikke å gjøre det når det er 2 språk som ligner hverandre mye. Det kan være forvirrende. For eksempel ikke prøve å lære norsk og svensk samtidig. Det skal ikke fungere, tror jeg. Men hvem vet? Men siden de språk var forskjellige, og jeg skjønte litt av italiensk og litt av norsk, kunne jeg bygge opp 2 språk samtidig. Så jeg lærte en, og i det samme tid lærte jeg den andre. Det var også mer morsomt å gjøre enn bare lære 1 språk om gang. Hvis du vil lære 2 språk samtidig, da kan du også lære det via YouTube. Jeg har en venninne som produserer veldig bra videoer, tysk og spansk, så tysk for de som allerede kan spansk. Og jeg bare anbefaler denne kanalen. Du finner linket til den i deskripsjonen av videoen her. Language number 5 in Dutch. Don't bother what other people think. Als je iets nieuws probeert, kun je kritiek krijgen. Vaak is kritiek een projectie van de persoons eigen angsten. We zijn in een maatschappij dat geobsedeerd is door hoe we overkomen. Er zijn daar heel veel mee bezig. En als we daar een beetje minder mee bezig zijn, dan kunnen we daar makkelijker groeien. Omdat we makkelijker kunnen fouten maken, ervan leren en gewoon doen wat we willen. We leven ons eigen leven en we zijn daar verantwoordelijk voor. Laat je niet tegenhouden tegen mensen die kritiek zullen hebben over jouw taal die je wilt leren, waarom je het wilt leren, hoe je het wilt leren. Om je minder te interesseren wat mensen denken over jou, geeft je een concurrentievoordeel. Tip number 6 in German, how to be more efficient. Es ist am wichtigsten, Spaß zu haben beim Sprachlernen, aber keine Ergebnis sehen kann die motivierendest sein. Daher kann Effizienz wichtig sein. Zum Beispiel lernen Sie auch Sprachen am besten zu der Tageszeit, zu der Sie sich am besten konzentrieren können. Tip number 7 in Italian. Use every opportunity to speak the language, no matter if it's not with a mother tongue. Parlare con una persona madrelingua non è el unico o migliore modo para praticar una lingua. Può essere anche utile praticare con un altro studente di lingua imparando la stessa lingua. Spesso avranno più tempo, spesso saranno più disponibili e spesso parleranno più lentamente. Tip 8, in Portuguese, it can sometimes help to speak out what you read to help yourself practicing the language and better your pronunciation. Tente ler em voz alta para praticar a pronúncia. I will now be addressing different limitations, tips, but also debunk some myths around language learner. So the first myth is that there is a maximum amount of languages we can learn. This is completely wrong. There are people that learn and know I don't know how many languages. It can feel daunting when you learn a new language. There's always this period where you feel you will never make it. But hang in there. Even though you might be confused with another language, sometimes it happens with me when I try to learn Italian. Often Spanish words came in, but the better my Italian got, the less this happened. There is virtually no limit to what you can learn in general, and that's definitely not true in languages. We can learn as many languages as we want. The other misconception I want to address is the flip side of the other one. There's people that say that when you speak a language, it makes it easier for you to learn other languages. This is partially wrong, but it's also partially true, but not for the reasons you might think. I think that when you learn a language and you've been successful at it, that means that you've developed some tricks to know how to learn a language. You developed the stamina, you developed memory games, how to learn the language. You did what worked once, so you will be able to do it more again. You didn't get discouraged, you probably applied some of the tips that I mentioned before in this video. So the reason you might learn another language faster is because you know what it takes. Because you learned how to learn faster. And learning languages is so powerful because it helps you in other aspects of your life. For me, it helped me in my studies. When I was passionate about languages, when I was very young and started learning languages kind of more by myself, I learned things that were later useful in my study life to memorize things. I can maybe make a video about like more hands-on tips to memorize something by heart, how to make yourself memorize things faster, maybe also the research behind it, because I got interested in that. This video was more like broad tips, but I can go into the nitty-gritty. If that's something you like, please share it in the comments. I'm happy to share it in the next video. What is true, I hear a lot of people say that you can lose the ability to speak a language, and not really. In my case, there's this 5 languages, this one I spoke first in this video, that I'm fluent in. I can talk about everything, anywhere, without any problem. I can think in those languages. It doesn't mean that I speak them perfectly, it just means that I can communicate really easily without any problem. Maybe there's sometimes a word that I don't know, or a sentence that I mispronounce. Those things are not a problem. In a professional setting, it can only be a problem, but then there's ways and tricks to get around it, even though you don't speak it perfectly, to write it perfectly. Anyways, but the languages that I get worse at when I don't practice them are the 3 last languages I spoke in. German, Italian, and Spanish. German, Italian, and Portuguese. And these are because these languages, although I can speak them relatively easy on a holiday, especially like travel vocabulary, get around, ask basic questions, have conversations, I'm not really fluent in those languages, which means I cannot go and present my research in that language without any practice in the beginning. I would be lost. And those languages I found I get worse at when I don't speak. But it comes back very fast actually afterwards. For example, with German, there was a time I spoke it much better than I do now, and now if I would go to Germany, I would have to do something, for example, a bit more challenging, for example, something related to work and present something in German would be very difficult, but it would be possible if I spend a few hours or maybe a weekend with German people and get used to it again, and then very rapidly I go back to the level I was at before. And with a little bit of practice I could do Again, what I was able to do before, so don't get discouraged. You don't lose languages. I don't know if it's actually possible. I feel like people who say, oh, I spoke that language fluently before and then I forgot. I'm a little bit skeptical because I've just never seen it. But maybe it's the case in some people. Maybe over many years, if you don't speak it in 30 years. But I also have seen people who didn't speak a language in 20 years, and just when it was a language they spoke fluently, they can switch it back on like that. At first they're like, oh no, I don't speak it anymore. And then 5 minutes later, when you try to speak that language with them, they will speak it perfectly almost, or with some mistakes, but that doesn't matter. But they can have a fluid conversation, and they have this moment or like, oh my god, I didn't remember that I could speak it actually. But when it was once fluent in your head, it will stay forever. I'm pretty sure of that. Of course, languages can open you up the world. It can make you think critically, actually, because you see that news is reported in a different way, and you start thinking like, why do I tend to go for this journal that presents things in this way? Why do I go to see this newspaper? Is there a representation bias? What is told about? What is talked about? What is not talked about? For example, what I see in Norwegian news is very different than what I see in French news. I hope you enjoyed this video. I want to wish you good luck with language learning. Again, feel free to subscribe and like, and check out the other videos on this channel. And I'm happy you joined for this video, and I see you in the next one. Bye!